Wait a sec. If you're so hot on this girl, how come we haven't met her? You embarrassed of us or something?
That's what it is. We're not good enough for her.
Well, that's true, you're not. But that's not the reason.
We always start, the biggest basis for us is the read. So the dialogue read is key. From the boards, we'll listen to the dialogue that we'll get from the directors. From that, we'll go into grin, and ultimately we try to tell all the animators is loop the dialogue, close your eyes, listen to it. So what I've done here is actually loaded in the dialogue for the specific section that we're going to use. I'm just going to play it quickly for you.
Sorry I bothered you.
Now from this, the big thing that we tell them is this should invoke a response from you. It's not a flat read. Now you can see that MJ's going, I'm sorry I bothered you. Without looking at the storyboards and just hearing the audio, I can tell that she's obviously feeling empathy. She's very sad for this, and I naturally want to drop my shoulders and bow my head. I'm feeling meek, and I want forgiveness from this. Once we've got all our shapes defined, we're getting, if you look at the bottom here, what we're dealing with is an F-curve window. Now these are default shapes. We suggest to our animators that you don't actually use these. These are essentially a match from what we get from our TD department and our software department who set up the shapes. Now looking through sort of our S shape here, I'm like, well, I know that she's gonna come through this and she's gonna need a little more pursed mouth. So if you notice in the F-curves, as I'm adjusting the sliders, I can adjust my default shape to what I'm getting. Next thing you'll do, we'll go through and drop in a jaw pass. Once we do the jaw, we'll go in next into corners of the mouth, happy, sad, to give us the expression through the mouth. The last pass that we do is eyes. You get the mouth shape right, people don't look at it. You get the mouth shape wrong, they can't look anywhere else. So the biggest thing we do is make sure the mouth's working. A lot of newer animators get locked into the standpoint that you gotta hit every phoneme. But if you actually watch people, you realize that our mouth actually doesn't move a whole heck of a lot. There's some slight animation on the brows,
Sorry I bothered you.
which is actually a key point that a lot of animators take over the top. We get a lot of Elvis eyebrows. Brows should never float. With character animation as well, it is pose to pose. Now, if we come to our bottom window here, for example, I'm going to grab my jaw curve. Up to the right, you'll see the jaw. I can add more jaw into MJ. So one way to do it here, or I can actually go through and individually move points on this line. So what I've done here is I've actually made MJ's jaw come a lot closer to her mouth.
Sorry I bothered you.
So you can see I've actually dampened the jaw.
Bothered you.
And there's also a little bit of sardonic and side roll jaw that's happening over here.
Sorry I bothered you.
Again, layer upon layer, everything's affecting each other.
Wanna grab lunch? I got a serious pastrami Jones working.
Okay, I know that look. Extra lean, on sourdough, hold the mustard.
And here I thought you weren't paying attention.
I may find out that I need a little more of upturn in MJ's lips. We need her eyes to pop a little more. I need a little more range in her brows. From that, what I can do is actually go to our technical department and say, look, this is what we need. They can provide me with the answers either based on the limitations of the model, that we may not be able to do that, or we can. One of the biggest changes that we've gone into is structure keys for the character. So if you look up to the right here, you'll see that we actually have poses. Now these are a set of defined shapes for Mary Jane, where there she is sad. This is the extreme positions that we're going to push the brows. Now that doesn't mean that we can't give you a little more, or we can't give the character a little more, but this is the range, saying, you know what, for a maximum, this is how MJ looks throughout the comics, throughout her history.
Every time anyone, anywhere asks you to do anything, you're like unavailable.
Not always.
Okay. Hey, Pete, there's a party tonight at the Sigmas. Want to come?
It's critical that we realize when we're in Grin, A, it is animation. It's not some mystical, magical little program that's going to do wonders for us. It still needs that creativity and input from the animator. It needs that whole creative process.
So I begged the Bugle to give me an actual job, not just the freelance stuff.
What'd they say?
They told me McDonald's is hiring all shifts.
Dude, all the fries you can eat. You don't even need to supersize.
So this is the hardware test before we go to final rendering. What the low res allows us to do is take a look at if we're getting the shapes through in Grin. So it's a chance to look at the Grin file on the character from the specified camera angle in motion. It is a dress rehearsal, and if the rehearsal is successful, we go to final rendering.
But you were the one who made me feel like I was more than I ever thought I could be.
MJ, I just can't do this.
I'm sorry I bothered you.
Pre-production, the choice was to not actually motion capture much at all. The choice was to actually keyframe the show and then add some motion capture characters in the background. And then when the show started coming in, the idea to keyframe Spider-Man definitely stuck. That was an aesthetic choice and it really works well for the show. But we decided that it was much more production friendly and for the aesthetic look to actually motion capture as much of the other characters as we could. On the school campus with the guys walking around with their books, lots of those we'll just capture and reuse. And then with the primary characters, any time that you get Mary Jane and Harry and Peter in Harry's apartment or around the drip den, all of those instances where they're being human characters will motion capture as well.
Keyframe animation is what Mainframe prides themselves on. Each animator manually manipulates the characters through rotations of bones, similar to what traditional animation is, whereas the motion capture is we capture a human's movement and apply it to the character.
Motion capture will not give you any subtlety in terms of the details. What it will give you is the broad stroke. So we'll take the characters, we'll get them moving around in the right time, in the right place, and then feed it to the guys so they can make it work.
Once the animator gets the motion capture, they have the job of integrating the keyframe character, which is Spider-Man in this case, to work with the same movements. And that can be a tricky job because generally if you're doing a purely keyframe sequence, you control the timing of both characters, whereas this one you're working with timing that already pre-exists.
Another interesting note is that often what we'll do is capture Spider-Man in the motion capture studio as what we define as negative space. And what that means is that we actually will place somebody in the capture volume to act as Spider-Man, and then the other actor working to Spider-Man will have somebody to work off.
It's very interesting to watch a show that is a combination of motion capture and keyframe, and the Spider-Man series is a great example of it really working well together.
Do you think we'll work like this again in the future?
I think we're living in the future.
I've got something very hot and juicy for you. If you're interested.
Hot and juicy?
One of the really cool things about animating on Spider-Man, I think, is that the characters are complex, that their relationships are complex, and of course, character animators love to get into characters that have something going on behind what you see. So it's a big part of that is to discuss that and find out where the character's coming from. And then the diversity of the characters, like in the female characters that you've animated, they range from really nasty villains to
people who have crushes on the major characters, and there's love triangles, and and everybody's got personal trials that they're going through. He's lost his dad, so there's a lot of character you can bring out.
Well, we start with the boards, of course, and where the vision is the blueprint for the vision there, and trying to determine the best way that we can bring across the emotions that the characters are feeling. So first, deciphering what is the main emotion that the character's feeling, and why are they feeling? What's the backstory? So we got to start there to know how it fits into the greater story. And
Scaly, know where I can get a little tail?
With action sequences, they're fairly complicated. If there's a lot of interaction, a lot of changing of center of gravity, usually with Spider-Man, since he's so flexible, so extreme, he does a lot of things like handsprings and grabbing poles and swinging from webs. So his center of gravity seems to change a lot.
Spider-Man's, he's a kind of a dream for an action animator to work on, because he goes to extremes, and of course that's what animation is about, is hitting extremes. So, the fact that he's not expected to be human, he's expected to be superhuman, gives these guys license to really push things.
And it is a cartoon, so you get away with things. I mean, you push them, you can snap them, you stretch them to the extreme. Physics and inertia are important, but you can get away with a lot of things like really quick movements, really hard landings.
Seriously, ow!
A single shot could take as much as a week to a week and a half we've had up to, whereas other shots might be as simple as you get 3 or 4 shots done in a day. So it's really a massive range. But for the complex shots, the key is to start with the basic blocking.
Then you definitely use broad strokes, and you do something we call a Gumby, animation with this like stick people kind of walking, you know, very stiff animation to get the major movements down.
Then we make sure it's working for the camera. We make sure it's working in the sequence. There's no point working in the finer details of the shot if we find out that the general gist of it is wrong. So we try and work it up in stages, because otherwise the animators can invest a lot of time and have it just thrown out the window.
NYPD's gonna be pursuing you. You won't get to the mayor.
How'd you track me?
You have a thing for 30mm carbine tracers.
The voice acting determines the quality of the performance that the animator is going to be able to give you, yeah, it's a lot of it comes from us. If the shot is a talking head, a close-up of a person, you don't animate the whole body. You just start with the sound file and you do the lip syncing and the expression on the eyebrows, and then phone it in from the suite, which is over there, into this room, which is the Avid, and then the director or the supervisor will answer, and they'll take a test, which I don't know how to do because I don't work in here.
Ready. Go! Sometimes an animator will send you something that is almost bang on from the beginning. Other times, you know, you might need to massage it quite a bit because different animators have different styles. It's like an actor bringing you, you know, how about like this, and then, you know, maybe something you never thought about, and you help just shape that because, you know, sometimes it might be wonderful animation, but it's just not quite right for the moment. So those little massages until it gets and fits, and of course playing it in the context of the scene, then you really get to see is it working, and working it up like that through 2 or 3 tests till the performance is there.
So, what's your deal? Bit by a radioactive light bulb?
We'll get them to come in. We'll actually just go through it on the Avid, and it's really handy that we can be right here in no time, seeing how it fits into the cut. We can just, we call it scrub through the shot, basically just going through kind of frame by frame to diagnose the places that are working, the places that need work.
Just let him kind of look from arm to arm, just kind of like that before he finally breaks them free.
A lot of the cuts are really quick. I mean, you'll have, you know, less than a second of a cut of a shot, and you don't really have a lot of time to see the transition between poses. So hitting a strong pose is probably one of the most important things in an action sequence.
Cute trick. Where were you when we had an energy crisis?
After we get it approved, the lighting starts, and it's much like lighting in the real world, except for the computer can do impossible things. We can tell a light not to affect a certain scene object or a certain character or a certain part of a character. So you can do kind of impossible things as well as, but the major theories are the same as film. And at that point, that's when we start doing higher res still images just to show the Avid where the major light will be coming from. It can take a while with a complex scene to get it lit properly. A high-res image of a more complex scene might take 10 minutes a frame, up to, I think, 30 minutes is our sort of limit that we give things.
Okay, Spider-Man. Time to play hero.
I hate when that happens.